Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the Consistory. I'm your host for this video, Reverend Jake Zabel of the St. John's Evangelical Lutheran Church, located in Dalby, Queensland, Australia. Today's video is an interesting one. It is asked, are unicorns real? So this is because the term unicorn gets mentioned in many Bibles, including the King James and stuff, a lot of older traditions. You look at some new traditions, they'll translate it as wild ox or something. So the question is unicorns real? So, is the biblical unicorn real? And the answer I want to say is yes. Unicorns are real, and we call them rhinos. I'm going to explain this in this video. If you'd like to watch a more in-depth video on this discussion, I have done videos on this topic before. I've got at least two up talking about the topic of unicorns in the Bible. And the thing that comes out of those is that when the Bible uses the term unicorn, it is not talking about some kind of magical horse with a horn on its head. It's talking about a creature that we all know, the rhino. Specifically, most likely, the Asian rhino, or the Indian rhino, which has a single horn. It is a unicorn. Because we aim to keep the Ask the Consistory videos about 5 minutes, no longer than 10 minutes, I can't give an in-depth explanation on this topic, but I have done in-depth, and I have addressed this video in depth in other videos which you can check out, which I'm going to put links to in the description below. So in this video, I'm just going to give the quickest, shortest hand version of this answer that I can. Now, according to the Bible, there are 9 places where the term unicorn pops up. Numbers 23:22, Numbers 24:8, Deuteronomy 33:17, Job 39:9 and 10, Psalm 22:21, Psalm 29:6, Psalm 92:10, and Isaiah 34:7. Here the Hebrew word is re'im. This became monokeratus in the Greek Septuagint. That means one horn. In the Latin Vulgate, it became 2 words, either unicorn or rhinoceros, depending on which verse. The verses from Isaiah and Psalm 22 and Psalm 92 use unicornus, whereas Psalm 29 and Job and Numbers and Deuteronomy all use rhinoceros. In the German, Luther used einhorn, and in the English King James Bibles, it used unicorn. And so basically, the unicorn is whatever the Hebrew people meant when they said re'im. The Septuagint was translated, depending on the traditions, it was translated into Greek from the Hebrew by Jewish rabbis. And so they knew what re'im was when they translated it. And they translated as monoceratus, unicorn. And what did they consider a unicorn? Well, we actually know already if you go back to the Webster's Dictionary of 1828. If you look up unicorn, it's defined as a rhinoceros and a narwhal. If you look up Webster's Dictionary from 1828, it doesn't say anything about a magical horse with a horn. It defines a unicorn as a rhino, or a rhinoceros, which you can see in the Latin Vulgate from like the 400s, where St. Jerome translated the Hebrew word re'im, the Greek word monokeratus, into rhinoceros. And you can see this in some of the verses in Scripture. For Job 39 talks about how the unicorn cannot be bound to a plow. He can't be used for plowing. You have Deuteronomy that talks about the unicorn being like strong, like a bullock. So you're probably wondering, if unicorns are just rhinos, then where did this idea of a horse with one horn come from? Well, there's an easy explanation to that, and it really comes from just confusion over some texts from Greek writers. So one of the earliest writings that talks about the unicorn, or the monokeratus, comes from the Greek historian and physician Ctesias, and this comes from his manuscript Indica, or India, from the 400s BC. And here he talks about these creatures that had been spotted in India. They were one-horned creatures, which he calls unicorns, and he describes them as, wild donkeys. Then you also have Aristotle in the 300s, who writes about one-horned creatures, which he calls the Indian ass. There's also Strabo in the 1st century AD, who talks about one-horned horses living in the Caucasus regions. And there's also his contemporary, though, Pliny the Elder. Now, Pliny writes something very interesting. He doesn't refer to it as the Indian horse or the Indian ass or the Indian anything like that. He calls it the Indian ox, and he calls it the unicorn. And he describes it as followed: a fierce creature, a very fierce animal, called the unicorn, which has the head of a stag, the feet of the elephant, the tail of the boar, while the rest of the body is like that of a horse. It makes a deep lowing noise, and has a single black horn, which projects from the middle of its head, 2 cubits in length. Now this actually probably fits a great description of the rhino. He says it has the head of a stag, the tail of a boar, the feet of an elephant, which fits the description of the Indian rhino. And the interesting part is that he does say it has the body of a horse. Which, okay, so this is where they get like this horse concept, that people were calling the Indian rhino and describing it and saying it looks similar to a horse. Now some people may be like, but a rhino doesn't look anything like a horse. Well, let me ask you another question. Do you know what hippopotamus means? Because it means river horse. People describe the hippo as a river horse. So, does a hippo look like a horse? No, but it's called a horse. It's described to be like a horse, and so the rhino is also compared to being like a horse. It's just a creature that the Romans and the Greeks would have known that they could compare it to. Basically, what has happened is that these people have gone to India, spotted this creature, described it, and then later historians in the Middle Ages, picking up this Greek manuscript and not having seen a rhino, they go, okay, well, there's a one-horned creature, it says it looks a bit like a horse, well, we'll just draw a horse with a horn on its head. And that's how we get to the state of the medieval mythical horse with one horn on its head, unicorn. So really we just go back to the fact that the Bible talks about unicorns. Are unicorns real? Yes, unicorns are real. They are rhinos. And so whenever you see unicorn appearing in the King James Bible, translate it as rhino. Kind of annoys me that many modern English translations haven't done this kind of research, and they'll often translate it as a wild ox or something. But if they went and looked at what the Greek Septuagint and the Latin Vulgate had referred to this creature, they could say, oh, well, Rayim is actually referring to a rhino rather than a wild ox. The difficulty comes in the fact that we don't really know 100% sure what a Rayim is. The word seems to be connected with the verb ra'am, which means to rise up, but that's about it. And how does that come to describe some type of creature? I don't know, I'm not an ancient Hebrew, I didn't develop the Hebrew language, but basically there's this thing that the Hebrews called a re'im, which the Greek-speaking rabbis called a monokeratos, and then later St. Jerome, when he wrote the Vulgate, said that the monokeratos, or the unicorn, was the rhinoceros, or as we would call them today, rhinoceros. And so yes, unicorns exist, we just call them rhinos. So thank you for watching this edition of Ask the Consistory. If you have any questions for further episodes, just email them to our email address, coelc-atc@hotmail.com. I've been your host, Reverend Jake Zabel. Goodbye and God bless.